The life for a Roman slave was a very difficult one. It would begin by waking up at sunrise, going outside, working until dawn, and they were fed very rarely. They were considered property of any patrician and were often beaten or whipped. Who were slaves? Slaves were people who were captured in wars, forgotten children, and fathers could sell their eldest children into slavery in times of prosperity. Once you were in slavery, you were essentially in there for life. The only way you could get out of slavery was to escape or buy out the price that your owner paid for you, which could never be achieved by the wages slaves received. 25% of ancient Rome's population was slaves. A successful man or patrician could potentially own up to 500 slaves. An emperor customarily had 20,000 slaves at one time. A common job of a slave would be starting a fire or helping the master get dressed. Some other helpful jobs were walking the master's children to school and preparing meals for the day. Most people became slaves by being captured in war and taken to a slave market, and then the auctioneer would explain their best or worst qualities. The most prized slaves were more commonly the cook. The cook was used to make food. The cooks were the most expensive of slaves and were a truly prized possession. The next best thing to a cook was an attractive young girl. Any slave owner would pay up to 6,000 denarii for a good-looking girl, which is 120,000 US dollars.
In Rome, patricians were at the top of the social class. They were very wealthy people and had many privileges that others did not have. Education was important, and boys were taught by a private tutor. They learned things that would be useful to them later in life, such as public speaking. Almost all of patrician boys grew up to be involved in government. Religion was a big part in the patricians' lives, and they claimed to have special knowledge about the gods. In 509 BCE, patricians took over the Roman government and created a republic. Lucius Junius Brutus played an important role in overthrowing the government, and he became the first consul. The patricians began to lose control of Rome when the plebeians became wealthier and threatened to leave Rome. This threat was taken very seriously because the majority of the Roman population was made up of plebeians.
Claudius was the fourth emperor of Rome. He was born in 10 BC in France. He became emperor at the age of 15 because he was the only surviving heir of Augustus. He was Caligula's uncle. After hearing the guards kill Caligula and his family, Claudius hid for safety, and when the guards found him behind a curtain, they made him emperor. A serious illness caused him to have a limp, and he was made fun of for it until he became emperor.
Claudius's biggest accomplishment was when he conquered Britain by sending 40,000 troops of soldiers and several water elephants across the English Channel. The public works he made weren't many, but they were helpful. He finished an aqueduct started by Gaius. He made his own aqueduct with stone arches and a spring with pools surrounding it. Claudius was very interested in history. He wrote 20 books of Etruscan history and 8 books of Carthaginian history in Greek. Claudius was married 4 times. He divorced his first wife because he was suspicious of adultery. He called off his second wedding because of political reasons. His third wife, Messalina, had a large number of affairs until she married Gaius Silius, and they were both executed. His third wife was his niece Agrippina, who tricked him into making her son Nero his heir and eventually poisoned him with mushrooms. He was so loved by his people that when he was reported dead on a trip to Ostia, people started calling the soldiers traitors and the Senate murderers, until the people were assured that he was fine.
And last but not least, we have the plebeians. The word plebeian is believed to come from the word pleo, which means to fill up, which makes sense considering that the plebeians were thought of as just additions to the population, and anyone who was not a patrician, a senator, or an equestrian was considered a plebeian. The plebeians were the hard-working class, but had to pay taxes to the richer. They were also considered the largest class of ancient Rome, and because of their size, they were extremely powerful when binding together during hard times and political unrest. The Emperor Augustus knew of their strength in numbers and tried to keep them happy with a famous system known today as bread and circus. The bread was Augustus would supply free grain and ensure that food prices would never get too high. The circus was chariots, races, and gladiator fights. Usually the competitors were slaves, criminals, or prisoners of war. The plan to bribe and distract the plebeians worked for Augustus. Did it stop?